My dad booted me off the $26,000 Dubai trip I paid for just to give my seat to my brother's parasite fiancée. He said she deserves it more. Big mistake. I made sure they'd never forget what happened next. Can you imagine spending $26,000 on a dream vacation for your family, only to be told you're not allowed to go? Because that's exactly what my own father did to me, kicking me off the trip I paid for, to give my spot to my brother's fiancée. I mean, what the hell happened next? I'm Alexandra, I'm 32, and for as long as I can remember, I've prided myself on being independent, hardworking, and fiercely devoted to my family. So, last year, when I poured every spare penny, a staggering $26,000 of my own money, into planning the most perfect, extravagant Dubai vacation for my parents and brother, it was a labor of love. I wanted to give them something truly unforgettable. Never, not in my wildest nightmares, did I imagine that one day my father would call me and tell me I was no longer welcome on my own trip. My place was being given to my brother Michael's fiancée, Natalie. To truly understand the gut punch of being removed from this trip, you need to know a bit about my family and the messed up dynamics that have simmered beneath the surface for years. I'm a senior financial manager at a pretty prestigious investment firm here in Chicago. After 10 years of relentlessly climbing that corporate ladder, I've finally reached a place where I actually enjoy some financial stability and, yes, the occasional luxury. I bought my own home 3 years ago, paid off all my student loans last year, and I'm carefully building my investment portfolio. My hard work has really paid off, and I'm genuinely proud of what I've accomplished, completely on my own. Then there's my dad, John. He's 62, a retired military officer, and trust me, he ran our household the same way he ran his platoon. Strict rules, sky-high expectations. Growing up, his approval was this elusive thing I desperately sought, but rarely, if ever, received. My mom, Diane, she's 60, and she's always been the family peacekeeper. She rarely contradicted my father. She just sort of went along with whatever he decided, even when it was painfully obvious she disagreed. Their marriage, very traditional. Dad made the decisions, Mom supported them. And then there's Michael, my older brother. He's 35, and honestly, he's never quite found his footing in life. After dropping out of college twice, he's bounced between various sales jobs, never sticking anywhere for more than a year or two. Despite all of this, my parents, especially my dad, have always treated him like the golden child. Growing up, Michael could literally do no wrong in their eyes. If he scraped by with a C in school, my father would praise him for passing. But if I got all A's, except for one B, my father would grill me, demanding to know why I couldn't achieve a perfect report card. This maddening pattern continued straight into adulthood. When Michael needed money to pay off his credit card debt after some spontaneous trip to Las Vegas with his friends, my parents, without a second thought, dipped into their retirement savings to bail him out. But when I needed a small loan to cover an unexpected medical bill during my first year out of college, my father lectured me about financial responsibility and told me to figure it out on my own. And you know what? I did. I picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop where I worked, and I ate ramen noodles for a month to make ends meet. The disparity, the sheer unfairness of how we were treated, was crystal clear. But I learned to accept it. I just focused on building my own life, becoming financially independent as quickly as humanly possible. I put myself through college and grad school, taking out loans and working part-time jobs the whole way. Meanwhile, my parents paid for all of Michael's multiple attempts at higher education, none of which he ever completed. Despite this wildly uneven treatment, I've always remained close to my family. I visit my parents at least twice a month for Sunday dinners, and I call them regularly. I've always tried to be the daughter they could be proud of, even if they rarely expressed that pride directly. As my career advanced and my financial situation improved, my parents, slowly but surely, started to see me as a resource. 2 years ago, when their roof needed replacing, my father called to ask if I could help out. I contributed $8,000 toward the repairs. Last year, when Michael was between jobs, my mother subtly hinted that he was struggling to make rent. I quietly sent him $2,000, which he never even acknowledged or thanked me for. It was around that time that Michael started dating Natalie. She's 28 and works part-time at a boutique downtown. Though from what Michael shares, she calls in sick more often than she actually shows up. From the moment I met her, something just felt off. She was polite enough, but there was this calculating glint behind her smile that instantly made me uneasy. Natalie, I quickly realized, had an uncanny ability to identify exactly who held the purse strings in our family. Within weeks of meeting my parents, she was calling them Mom and Dad, and spending more time at their house than at her own apartment. She'd compliment my mother's cooking with excessive enthusiasm and listen to my father's military stories with rapt attention, asking all the right questions that perfectly stroked his ego. With me, however, she was different. After learning what I did for a living, her eyes lit up with a look I'd seen far too many times before. It was that same look people get when they discover you have access to money, and they immediately start mentally calculating what they might get from you. She began asking pointed questions about my salary, my home, my vacation habits. When I remained vague, her interest in building a relationship with me noticeably cooled. What bothered me most was how quickly she managed to insert herself into every single family gathering. If I planned to take my parents to dinner, somehow Michael and Natalie would mysteriously end up joining. If I wanted to spend one-on-one time with my mom, Natalie would coincidentally drop by with some small gift or a question that required immediate attention. I really tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just eager to be part of a family. Maybe her attachment to my parents came from a place of genuine affection. But the more time passed, the more I noticed a pattern. Natalie was only interested in the material benefits of being connected to our family. She'd comment on my mother's jewelry, hinting at how she'd always wanted similar pieces. She'd admire my father's car and mention that Michael had promised to buy her one just like it someday, looking pointedly at my father as she said it. Michael, for his part, seemed completely oblivious to her tactics. He was clearly infatuated, hanging on her every word and going out of his way to please her. I noticed he'd started buying her ridiculously expensive gifts, despite his notoriously precarious financial situation. When I gently asked where the money was coming from, he vaguely mentioned side gigs, but quickly changed the subject. I strongly suspected my parents were funding his newfound generosity, but I chose not to press the issue. Despite my growing reservations about Natalie, I still loved my brother and desperately wanted to maintain a good relationship with him. And despite the uneven treatment from my parents over the years, I still deeply cared for them and wanted to do something truly special to show my appreciation. That's when the idea for the Dubai trip began to take shape in my mind. The inspiration for the Dubai trip hit me during a quiet moment at work. I was reviewing some absurd travel expense reports for our executives when it clicked. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary was approaching. 40 years. Despite all the complicated, frustrating dynamics in our family, 40 years of marriage was an incredible milestone. It deserved to be celebrated in a spectacular way. My parents had never traveled outside the United States. My father always said international travel was too expensive and complicated. My mother, though, occasionally expressed a quiet desire to see different parts of the world, but she never pushed the issue. I wanted to give them an experience they would never forget, something completely different from their normal lives in suburban Illinois. Dubai seemed absolutely perfect. It offered luxury, rich cultural experiences, mind-blowing architectural marvels, and thrilling desert adventures, all in one destination. I just knew the photos of them in front of the Burj Khalifa or riding camels in the desert would be something they'd treasure forever. And the weather would be ideal during their anniversary month, not too hot, but warm enough to enjoy the beautiful beaches. I started researching immediately, spending my lunch breaks and evenings after work meticulously mapping out the perfect itinerary. I wanted everything to be first class, a true, once-in-a-lifetime experience. I looked into 5-star hotels, private desert safaris, exclusive dining experiences, and VIP access to all the top attractions. I also decided, despite our differences, to include my brother in the trip. He was their son too, and I knew they would want him there to celebrate this milestone with them. The total cost was staggering, nearly $26,000 for the 4 of us. It would take almost all of my annual bonus and a significant portion of my hard-earned savings. But I decided firmly that it was worth it. I set up a separate savings account and began putting money aside each month. I took on additional projects at work that offered performance bonuses. I even cut back on my own expenses, making coffee at home instead of stopping at Starbucks, bringing lunch to work instead of eating out, and postponing the kitchen renovation I had been planning for my house. Over the course of 18 months, I methodically saved and planned. I worked with a high-end travel agency to book first-class Emirates flights. I reserved rooms at the Burj Al Arab, one of the most luxurious hotels in the world. I arranged for a private desert dinner experience, complete with traditional entertainment. A guided tour of the Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi. A private yacht cruise around the Palm Jumeirah. And of course, VIP access to the observation deck of the Burj Khalifa. I even scheduled a private shopping experience at the Dubai Mall with a personal stylist. Each booking, each payment, brought me immense joy as I imagined my parents experiencing these things for the first time. I pictured my mother's face as she stood at the top of the tallest building in the world. I imagined my father, who had been deployed in the Middle East during his military service but never had the opportunity to truly appreciate the culture, enjoying the traditional food and entertainment. I even, somewhat optimistically, looked forward to sharing these experiences with Michael, hoping that perhaps this shared adventure might help bridge some of the distance that had grown between us. When everything was finally arranged, I decided to present the trip to my family during a Sunday dinner. I created elaborate invitation cards with gold embossing, placing one next to each of their dessert plates. My mother opened hers first, her hands trembling slightly as she read the details. She looked up at me with tears welling in her eyes, speechless. "Alexandra, is this real?" she finally managed to ask, her voice a shaky whisper. I nodded, a huge smile spreading across my face. "Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad. I wanted to do something truly special for you both." My father studied his invitation with a furrowed brow, as if searching for the catch. "This must have cost a fortune," he stated, not asked. "Don't worry about that," I assured him, my voice light. "It's my gift to you. You both deserve it." Michael examined his invitation with wide, excited eyes. "First-class flights? The Burj Al Arab? Are you serious, Alex?" "Completely serious," I confirmed. "We leave in 6 months, the week of Mom and Dad's anniversary. I've already cleared the time off with work and even spoken to your boss too, Michael. Everything is arranged." My mother got up from her chair and came around the table to hug me tightly. "Thank you, sweetheart. This is the most wonderful gift anyone has ever given us." Even my father seemed genuinely moved, though he expressed it in his typical reserved manner. "This is very generous of you, Alexandra." "Thank you." It was one of those rare, precious moments where I felt truly appreciated by my family, especially my father. The look of genuine gratitude in his eyes, just for that fleeting instant, made all the sacrifices worth it. But that moment, that precious feeling, was abruptly interrupted when the doorbell rang. My mother went to answer it and returned with Michael's girlfriend, Natalie, in tow. She had apparently decided to surprise Michael by showing up for dessert, though I strongly suspected he had texted her about the dinner earlier. "I hope you don't mind me crashing your family dinner," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Michael mentioned your mom made her famous apple pie, and I just couldn't resist." As she took a seat next to Michael, her gaze snagged on the invitation cards. "What is this? Are we celebrating something?" Michael, bubbling with excitement, quickly explained about the Dubai trip, his voice practically brimming with details of all the luxurious elements I had planned. Natalie's expression transformed as he spoke, her eyes widening, a smile, not of genuine happiness for us, but of naked envy, spreading across her face. "Dubai? Oh my God, that sounds amazing!" she exclaimed, snatching up Michael's invitation. "I've always wanted to go there. All those Instagram influencers are always posting from Dubai. The shopping there is supposed to be incredible." I noticed she used the word Instagram, with particular emphasis, and I could already picture her plotting all the social media content she would create if she were on such a trip. The thought made me deeply uncomfortable, but I quickly reminded myself that she wasn't invited, so it wasn't an issue I needed to worry about. Throughout dessert, Natalie peppered me with questions about the trip. How long would we be staying? Which attractions would we visit? Would there be time for shopping? Had I arranged for any special experiences? With each answer I provided, her expression grew more intense, a mixture of longing and calculation that set off immediate warning bells in my mind. As the evening wound down and I prepared to leave, Natalie gave me an uncomfortably tight hug. "You are so generous to do this for your family, Alexandra," she purred. "Michael is lucky to have such a caring sister." Something in her tone felt profoundly disingenuous, but I just smiled politely and thanked her. As I drove home that night, I couldn't shake a vague sense of unease. In retrospect, I should have paid more attention to that feeling. It was the first, faint sign of the trouble to come. 2 months before our scheduled departure to Dubai, Michael called to share some news. He and Natalie had gotten engaged. He had proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, presenting her with a massive diamond ring that I later learned had been purchased with money borrowed from our parents. "That is wonderful news, Michael," I said, genuinely trying to sound enthusiastic despite my growing concerns about their relationship. "I'm happy for you both." "Thanks, sis," he replied, sounding genuinely excited. "We haven't set a date yet, but Natalie is already talking about venues and dresses. You know how women get about wedding planning." I let that eye-rolling comment slide and asked how our parents had reacted to the news. "They're thrilled," he boasted. "Mom cried and Dad actually hugged me. Can you believe it? They're having us over for dinner this Sunday to celebrate. You'll come, right?" I agreed to attend, though I had very mixed feelings about the engagement. On one hand, I truly wanted my brother to be happy. On the other, I had serious doubts about Natalie's motives and whether she truly cared for Michael or just saw him as a meal ticket with family connections she could exploit. When Sunday arrived, I drove to my parents' house with a nice bottle of champagne as an engagement gift. I had debated what to buy, ultimately deciding that champagne was traditional and appropriate without being overly expensive or personal. I was not ready to invest emotionally or financially in a relationship I had so many doubts about. When I arrived, the house was already in full-blown celebration mode. My mother had prepared an elaborate meal. My father had bought flowers for the table. Michael and Natalie were sitting in the living room, accepting congratulations like visiting royalty. Natalie was practically shoving her engagement ring into my mother's face, who was oohing and eyeing appropriately. "Alexandra!" Natalie exclaimed when she saw me, jumping up to embrace me. "I'm so glad you could make it. Look at my ring! Isn't it gorgeous? Michael did so well." I admired the ring, politely, noting that it was at least 2 carats and likely well beyond what Michael could afford on his own. My suspicions about my parents' financial involvement were essentially confirmed when I noticed my mother wearing costume jewelry instead of her usual gold pieces. She had likely pawned some of her own jewelry to help Michael buy that ring. During dinner, the conversation, inevitably, turned to the upcoming Dubai trip, which was now just 8 short weeks away. Natalie leaned forward eagerly as my mother discussed what clothes she planned to pack. "I've been researching Dubai fashion," Natalie interjected, her voice filled with unwarranted authority. "For the desert safari, you'll want to wear light layers because it gets cold at night. And for the Burj Al Arab, we should definitely dress up. I was thinking of wearing my new red dress, the one with the gold accents." Her casual use of the word "we" set off immediate, blaring alarm bells in my head. I glanced at Michael, who was suddenly very, very interested in studiously avoiding eye contact with me. My father, meanwhile, was nodding along as Natalie spoke, seemingly completely unbothered by her outrageous presumption. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice even. "Natalie," I began. "I'm not sure if Michael explained, but the trip is for our parents' anniversary. I've made reservations for 4 people, my parents, Michael, and myself." A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the table. Natalie's smile froze on her face, though her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. My father set down his fork with a deliberate motion that I recognized from childhood as a clear, chilling warning sign. "Alexandra," he said slowly, his voice laced with disapproval. "Now that Michael and Natalie are engaged, don't you think it would be appropriate to include her in our family celebration?" My stomach instantly tightened into a knot. "Dad," I pleaded, "I would love to include Natalie, but the trip has been planned and paid for with 4 people in mind. All the reservations, the hotel rooms, the private tours, everything, is arranged for 4. Adding a 5th person at this stage would be incredibly complicated and expensive. Surely you could make some adjustments." My father pressed on, his tone hardening. "Natalie is going to be part of our family now." My mother, who had been silent until now, tentatively spoke up. "The trip is Alexandra's gift to us, John. She's put a lot of thought and money into planning it." I shot her a grateful look, but my father simply waved away her comment with a dismissive hand. "Alexandra is doing very well in her career. I'm sure the additional costs would not be a burden for her." Michael finally looked up from his plate, choosing this moment to chime in. "Natalie has never been out of the country before. She doesn't even have a passport yet, but we're expediting it. This would be such an amazing first international experience for her." Natalie reached over and squeezed my father's hand, a look of faux sincerity plastered on her face. I would never want to impose, John. It's just that Michael has told me so much about this trip, and it sounds like such a special family time. I would love to be included, but I completely understand if it's not possible. Her tone was conciliatory, but her expression, the glint in her eyes, conveyed a different, triumphant message entirely. I took a deep breath, trying desperately to remain calm. The issue isn't just the additional cost, though that's certainly a factor. The Burj Al Arab suites I reserved are configured for specific numbers of guests. The desert dinner experience is a private booking for 4. The first-class airfare alone for another person would be over $5,000 at this point. And that's if we can even get a seat on the same flights. So you're saying no? My father's tone had an edge to it that I recognized all too well. The tone that meant an argument was pointless. I'm saying it would be very difficult to change everything at this point, I clarified, trying to find a diplomatic way out. Maybe Natalie and Michael can plan their own trip to Dubai after the wedding. I'd be happy to share my research and recommendations. That's very generous of you, Alexandra, Natalie said with a tight smile. But it wouldn't be the same as experiencing it together as a family, especially for such a special occasion. My father nodded in agreement, his gaze fixed on me. Families should be together for important celebrations. The profound irony of my father suddenly emphasizing family togetherness, when it directly benefited Natalie, was not lost on me. But I bit my tongue. This was supposed to be a happy occasion, celebrating my brother's engagement, not the time for a confrontation about decades of blatant favoritism. Let me look into the options, I conceded, though I had no intention of spending thousands more to include someone who I was increasingly certain was using my brother and my parents for her own gain. The rest of dinner proceeded under a thick, suffocating current of tension. When it was time to leave, my father walked me to the door, his expression serious, almost grim. Alexandra, I hope you will make the right decision about this trip, he said, his tone making it clear exactly what he considered the right decision to be. I'll do my best, Dad, I replied non-committally, already feeling a crushing sense of dread. As I drove home, that dread settled heavy in my stomach. I had a terrible feeling this issue was far from resolved, and I was right. It was only the beginning of a situation that would ultimately test the very bounds of my relationship with my entire family. A month before our scheduled departure to Dubai, my father called and asked me to come over to the house. We need to talk about the trip, he said, his tone uncharacteristically careful, almost cautious. Can you come by around 6 tonight? I agreed, though I had this sickening feeling about what this conversation would entail. I hadn't heard much about the trip in recent weeks, which was suspicious given how excited everyone had been initially. My attempts to confirm details with my parents had been met with vague responses and quick subject changes. When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, I immediately sensed something was deeply wrong. My mother opened the door, but could barely meet my eyes as she welcomed me in, her usual warmth noticeably absent. In the living room, my father sat in his favorite armchair, his posture rigid and imposing. Michael was on the couch, and beside him, looking surprisingly comfortable for someone who, in this situation, should have been a guest, sat Natalie. Alexandra, have a seat, my father said, gesturing to the lone chair across from him, positioned in a way that made me feel like I was about to face a firing squad. I sat down, my heart already hammering against my ribs. What's going on? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My father cleared his throat, a small, nervous sound. We've been doing some thinking about the Dubai trip, and we've made a decision. The use of "we" did not escape my notice. This was supposedly my gift to them. Yet, they were making decisions without me. Your mother and I believe that since Natalie is going to be joining our family, this anniversary trip would be a perfect opportunity for us all to bond and create memories together. I nodded slowly, having fully expected this. As I mentioned before, adding another person to the reservations would be complicated, but not impossible. If you all feel strongly about it, I can look into the additional costs and see what changes need to be made. That's not quite what we had in mind, my father continued, looking genuinely uncomfortable for the first time. Given the limitations you mentioned about the reservations being for 4 people, we think the most sensible solution is for Natalie to take your place on the trip. The words hit me like a physical blow. A searing, cold shock. I stared at my father, certain I had misheard him, that my ears were playing tricks on me. Excuse me? My voice was barely a breath. It makes the most sense. He pressed on, his voice taking on that authoritative tone he used when he expected no argument, no dissent. You have traveled internationally before. Natalie never has. This would be a new experience for her, whereas for you, it would just be another trip. I felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. My mother was staring at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger, avoiding my gaze completely. Michael had the decency to look somewhat ashamed, though certainly not enough to actually speak up on my behalf. Natalie, though, sat with a slight, knowing smile playing at her lips, her expression one of poorly concealed triumph. Dad, I finally managed, my voice still barely above a whisper. I paid for this trip. I planned every single detail. This was my gift to you and Mom for your anniversary. And we appreciate that, he replied quickly, cutting me off. But gifts, once given, belong to the recipient. Your mother and I would like to share this experience with our son and his future wife. The casual cruelty of his statement left me absolutely breathless. I looked to my mother, desperate, hoping for some support, some sign of a conscience, but she remained silent, her eyes downcast. Natalie deserves to go more than you do, my father added, delivering the most painful blow yet. She is about to become part of this family. This trip would mean so much more to her than it would to you. Tears pricked at my eyes, hot and angry, but I refused to let them fall. I have been planning this for over a year and a half, I said, my voice gaining strength despite the tremor in my hands. I worked extra hours, gave up my own vacation plans, and spent nearly $26,000 to create this experience for our family. And we will pay you back for your portion, my father said dismissively, as if that addressed the core, gut-wrenching issue. Michael has calculated that your share would be around $6,000. We can write you a check right now. I laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound that was more of a scoff. 6,000, Dad? My voice rose. The first-class airfare alone is more than that per person. Not to mention the hotel suites, the private tours, the special experiences I arranged. Michael finally spoke up, looking me straight in the eye, his voice dripping with condescension. Alex, don't be selfish about this. Family helps family, you know? Natalie and I can't afford a trip like this on our own. You have a great job and can go to Dubai anytime you want. Selfish? I repeated, my voice now shaking with pure, unadulterated anger. I spent my own money. Money I worked incredibly hard for, to give our parents a special anniversary gift. How exactly does that make me selfish? It's selfish to deny Natalie this opportunity just because you want to go. Michael shot back, his face reddening. You always have to be the center of attention. Don't you? Always showing off how successful you are, how much money you make. His words were so hypocritical, so utterly divorced from reality, that for a moment I couldn't even respond. I had spent years quietly supporting this family, receiving little recognition and even less gratitude. And now, I was being accused of showing off. Michael, I have never, Alexandra. My father cut me off, his tone absolute, final, making it clear he considered the matter settled. Our decision is final. Natalie will be going in your place. We can discuss the financial details later if you are unhappy with the amount we have offered. Natalie, who had been watching this exchange with barely concealed satisfaction, finally spoke, her voice oozing with fake sincerity. Alexandra, I want you to know how much this means to me. I never had the opportunity to travel growing up, and sharing this experience with Michael and my future in-laws is something I will cherish forever. I am so grateful to be included in such a special family moment. Her performance was flawless, her eyes wide with feigned earnestness. I could almost believe she meant it, if not for the smug, barely there smile she couldn't quite suppress. My mother finally looked up, her expression pained. Alexandra, it is fine, Mom. I interrupted, unable to bear hearing her make excuses for this staggering betrayal. I understand exactly what is happening here. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. I hope you all enjoy the trip. It is a gift, after all, and apparently gifts, once given, belong to the recipient to do with as they please. Don't be dramatic, Alexandra. My father said with a frown, clearly annoyed that I wasn't just rolling over. This is a practical solution to a simple problem. There was no problem until you created one. I replied, finding my voice again, strong and clear despite the pain. The problem is that you have always treated Michael differently than me. The problem is that you see nothing wrong with taking something I worked hard for and giving it to someone else because you think they deserve it more. The problem is that I am supposedly part of this family too, but I am being pushed aside the moment someone new comes along. My father's expression hardened, his jaw clenching. That is enough. I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. Fine, I said, grabbing my purse, my hand shaking with rage. Then I will leave. As I headed for the door, Natalie, ever the opportunist, called after me. Alexandra, please don't leave angry. We are going to be sisters soon. I would hate for this to come between us. I turned back to look at her, at all of them. You know what, Natalie? I said, my voice cold as ice. We are not going to be sisters. You may marry my brother. You may charm my parents, but you and I will never be family. Not after this. I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. In my car, the dam finally broke. I allowed the tears to fall, great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound, not just from my father, whose favoritism I had long ago accepted as a bitter truth, but from my mother, who had always at least pretended to love us equally. Even from Michael, who despite our differences, was still my brother, the person who had shared my childhood, and who should have understood what this meant to me. As I drove home, my sadness began to give way to a burning, righteous anger. I had spent thousands of dollars, countless hours planning, and made numerous personal sacrifices to create this special experience. And with a single, brutal conversation, it had been ripped from me and given to someone who had done absolutely nothing to earn it. Someone who was clearly using my family for her own benefit. By the time I reached my house, a steely resolve had hardened within me. I may have been removed from the trip, but I still had control over the reservations. And if my family thought they could treat me this way without consequences, they were about to learn a very, very expensive lesson. I spent that night crying until I had no tears left. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, a hollow ache in my chest that hurt with every breath. Around midnight I called my best friend Sarah, who, bless her, answered despite the late hour. They did what? She exclaimed after I, through choked sobs, explained what had happened. Your own father kicked you off a trip that you paid for, and they expect you to just accept that? Apparently. I said, my voice raw from crying. My dad actually said Natalie deserves to go more than I do. After everything I've done for them over the years, after all the times I've helped them financially, this is how they treat me. Alex, I love you, but you've got to stop letting your family walk all over you. Sarah said firmly, her voice filled with a protective anger. They've been taking advantage of your generosity for years, and now they've crossed a line that should never, ever be crossed. What am I supposed to do? I whispered. The trip is already paid for. If I make a fuss, I'll just be seen as the difficult one, as usual. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, Don't let them get away with this. You planned this trip. You paid for it. The reservations are in your name, right? Yes, I said, a flicker of an idea sparking in my mind. Everything was booked through my travel agent under my name. Then you still have control over those reservations, Sarah pointed out, and I could almost hear the triumphant smile in her voice. I'm not saying you should cancel everything because that might be too harsh. But maybe there are some adjustments that could be made. A full-fledged plan began to form in my mind, gaining clarity and icy resolve. You're right, I said, a new kind of strength in my voice. The bookings are all in my name. I'm the primary contact for everything. We talked for another hour, exploring various options, different levels of adjustments. By the time we hung up, my tears had dried, replaced by a cold, unwavering determination. I wouldn't cancel the trip entirely. That would be too vindictive, even under these circumstances. But I would ensure that the first-class, luxury experience I had planned and paid for was significantly altered. The next morning, I called my travel agent Melissa, who had helped me plan every detail of the Dubai trip. I explained the situation, carefully leaving out some of the more painful, personal details to maintain a semblance of professionalism. I need to make some changes to the Dubai booking, I said once the pleasantries were out of the way, my voice steady. Unfortunately, I will not be joining the trip, and we need to adjust the reservations accordingly. I'm sorry to hear that, Alexandra, Melissa replied, sounding genuinely disappointed for me. What kind of changes do you have in mind? First, I said, my voice crisp, I need to change the flight bookings. Instead of first class on Emirates, I would like to switch everyone to economy class. That's quite a downgrade, Melissa noted, a hint of surprise in her voice. Are you sure? Positive, I confirmed. Also, I need to cancel the reservation at the Burj Al Arab. Instead, please book 2 standard rooms at. I paused to reference the list of hotels I had researched the night before, specifically looking for ones that were less than glamorous. The City Seasons Hotel. It's in Dera, I believe. That's on the other side of the city from all the attractions you had planned to visit. Melissa pointed out, clearly trying to manage my expectations. And it's a 3-star hotel, not the luxury experience you were aiming for. That's fine. I assured her, not giving an inch. I also need to cancel all the private tours and experiences I had booked. The desert dinner, the yacht cruise, the VIP access at the Burj Khalifa, all of it. Alexandra, Melissa said cautiously, these changes will significantly alter the trip experience. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want to do? I am, I said firmly. My circumstances have changed, and these adjustments are necessary. Please also cancel the airport transfers and the personal shopping experience. Melissa sighed, but began making notes. What about basic transportation around Dubai? Do you want me to arrange anything for them? I considered this. I didn't want to strand my family completely in an unfamiliar city. That would be cruel and potentially dangerous. Please arrange for a basic tour package. Something that includes transportation to the main attractions, but without any VIP elements or private guides. I can do that, she confirmed. Will you be rebooking your portion of the trip for a later date? The refund for the downgraded elements could be applied to a solo trip for you. This was something I had already considered, actually. Yes. I've been thinking about visiting the Maldives. Could you see what kind of upgrade I could get for a one-person trip with the difference from these changes? The Maldives is beautiful, Melissa said, her tone warming. I would be happy to put together some options for you. With the difference from downgrading the Dubai trip, you could have a very luxurious experience there. We spent the next hour going through all the details, canceling, rebooking, and reallocating funds. When we were finished, the Dubai trip had been transformed from a first-class, luxury experience to a basic, no-frills international vacation. While I had secured myself a week at an overwater bungalow in the Maldives, complete with private butler service, daily spa treatments, and gourmet dining included. All the changes have been processed, Melissa confirmed. The new itineraries will be emailed to you shortly. Do you want me to send the updated Dubai itinerary to your family members directly? No, I decided after a moment of delicious consideration. I will handle communicating the changes to them. But I had no intention of doing so. Let them discover the truth when they arrived at the airport, expecting first-class treatment and champagne, only to be directed to the economy check-in desk. Let them realize what had happened when they arrived in Dubai and were taken to a basic hotel miles from the attractions instead of one of the most luxurious hotels in the world. A part of me, a tiny, lingering part, felt guilty about the deception, particularly where my mother was concerned. But then I remembered her silence. As my father informed me I was being removed from the trip I had paid for, her unwillingness to stand up for me, even in this extreme situation, the guilt faded, replaced by a deep, satisfying sense of justice. I wasn't canceling their trip. They would still get to go to Dubai, still get to see the sights and experience a new country together. They just wouldn't be doing it in the lavish style I had originally planned. The difference would go toward my own well-deserved vacation, a small, sweet compensation for the hurt they had caused me. As I hung up with Melissa, I felt a massive weight lift from my shoulders. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself against my family's unfair treatment. It wasn't a perfect solution, and I knew there would be fallout when they eventually discovered what I had done. But at that moment, I couldn't bring myself to care. They had made their choice, and now, I had made mine. The day of the Dubai trip arrived. I hadn't spoken to any of my family members since that fateful evening when I was removed from the trip. My father had called once, leaving a message about finalizing the financial arrangements for my portion of the trip cost, but I hadn't returned his call. My mother had texted a few times, bland messages that carefully avoided mentioning the elephant in the room. Michael had not reached out at all. I knew exactly when their flight was scheduled to depart, and I imagined them arriving at the airport, dressed in their best clothes, expecting to be ushered into the first-class lounge for champagne and gourmet snacks before boarding. Instead, they would be directed to the economy check-in line, standing with the masses, their boarding passes showing seats at the back of the plane rather than the spacious first-class pods I had originally booked. I was sitting at my desk at work, pretending to focus on a spreadsheet while actually watching the clock, when my phone finally rang. It was my father. I contemplated not answering, but decided it was time to face the music. "Hello, Dad," I said, keeping my voice utterly neutral, devoid of any emotion. "Alexandra, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger, practically sputtering. "We're at the airport, and they're telling us we have economy tickets, not first class. There must be some mistake." "No mistake," I replied calmly. "I made some adjustments to the reservations." There was a stunned silence. Then my father exploded. "You did what? How dare you change the arrangements without telling us? We look like fools standing here. The check-in agent is looking at us like we're trying to scam our way into first class." "I'm sorry you're embarrassed," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "But as you said, Dad, gifts once given belong to the recipient. You decided to change who was going on this trip, and I decided to change what kind of trip it would be. This is completely unacceptable." He sputtered, choking on his words. "We had an agreement. Did we?" I shot back, a cold, hard edge to my voice. "I don't recall agreeing to be kicked off my own trip. I don't recall agreeing to have my gift redistributed to someone who, until recently, was a stranger to our family." "Is this about money?" he demanded, grasping at straws. "Because if it is, we can discuss increasing the amount we pay you back." "It's not about money, Dad," I said, my voice filled with a lifetime of suppressed emotion. "It's about respect. It's about appreciation for what I tried to do for our family. It's about decades of being treated as less important than Michael, culminating in being told that his girlfriend deserves my place on a trip I paid for more than I do." I could hear my mother in the background, her voice muffled, asking what was happening. I heard my father's agitated explanation, then her sharp gasp of surprise. "Alexandra?" My mother's voice came through the phone, apparently having taken it from my father, her tone pleading. "Sweetheart, please. This is our anniversary trip. Can't we work this out?" "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, genuinely regretful that she was caught in the middle of this particular fire. "But the decision has been made, just like the decision to remove me from the trip was made. You are still going to Dubai. You will still see all the sights. It just won't be the luxury experience I had originally planned." "But," she began, only to be cut off as my father apparently snatched the phone back. "You listen to me," he said, his voice low and dangerous, a clear threat. "You fix this right now, or there will be serious consequences for your relationship with this family." "I think those consequences already happened, Dad," I replied, a wave of defiant power surging through me. "When you decided Natalie was more deserving of my place than I was. Enjoy economy class. I hear the middle seats are particularly comfortable." I hung up, my heart racing, but a profound sense of satisfaction flowing through me. I had expected to feel guilty, but instead, I felt utterly empowered. For once, I had refused to be the family doormat. Over the next few days, the messages rolled in, each one a new discovery, a new wave of realization for them. Michael texted furiously when they arrived at the hotel in Dera, far from the glamorous downtown Dubai area where they had expected to stay. "What the hell, Alex? This hotel is barely 3 stars and it's in the middle of nowhere. The rooms are tiny and there's no view. How could you do this to us?" I did not respond. My mother called when they discovered all the special experiences had been cancelled. Her voice was tearful as she left a message. "Alexandra, I understand you're hurt, but this was supposed to be our anniversary celebration. The desert dinner I was so looking forward to is cancelled. The private yacht cruise is gone. Everything special has been removed. Please call me back. We need to talk about this." I still did not return her call. Natalie, predictably, took to social media to express her displeasure, though she was careful not to mention me directly. Her Instagram posts, which had started out ridiculously enthusiastic about her dream trip to Dubai, quickly devolved into thinly veiled complaints. Not everything is as glamorous as it seems on social media. She wrote beneath a photo of their basic hotel room, looking thoroughly annoyed. #expectations reality #travel fails. Another post showed them stuck in the regular observation deck line at the Burj Khalifa, which I knew would mean hours of waiting instead of the immediate access the VIP tickets would have provided. 3-hour wait just to get to the elevator. Someone did not plan this very well. #exhausted #not worth it. The most satisfying message came 4 days into their trip. A voicemail from my father that represented a significant shift in tone from his previous anger. "Alexandra," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, almost small. I think I owe you an apology. We didn't realize the extent of what you had planned for this trip. The travel agency showed us the original itinerary when we tried to rebook some of the experiences. I had no idea you had invested so much into making this special." He paused, and I could hear him clearing his throat, a sound of genuine discomfort. "What we did was wrong. I see that now. Taking your place on this trip was unfair, especially after all you did to plan it. I should have considered your feelings more carefully. I hope when we return we can sit down and talk about this. I want to make things right." I saved that message, playing it back a few times, but I still didn't call back. I wanted them to sit with their actions for a while longer. The most unexpected development came in the form of a private message from my mother on the 5th day of their trip. It was longer and more heartfelt than anything she had communicated to me in years. "Alexandra, I need to tell you how sorry I am. Not just for this trip situation, but for years of standing by while your father favored Michael. I have always been too afraid to stand up to him, too worried about rocking the boat. But seeing how hurt you are, how justifiably angry, has made me realize that my silence has been a form of betrayal, too. I want you to know that Michael and Natalie have been fighting constantly on this trip. The stress of the downgraded accommodations, the long waits for attractions, the lack of special treatment Natalie expected, has revealed cracks in their relationship that I suspect were always there. Your father is beginning to see Natalie's true colors as well. She has been complaining nonstop and blaming everyone else for the disappointments. I know this does not excuse what we did to you, but I thought you should know that your absence has been keenly felt. This trip was your vision, your gift, and without you here to share it, it feels hollow. When we return, I hope we can begin to repair our relationship. I have a lot of making up to do, and a lot of changes to make in how I stand up for you in the future." That message brought hot tears to my eyes, not of sadness, but of validation. My mother had finally seen what I had been experiencing for years. It was a small step, but a profoundly significant one. The final update came from Michael, of all people, on the last day of their trip. His message was brief, but it spoke volumes. "You were right about Natalie. I'm sorry." From social media, I later pieced together that Natalie had thrown a full-blown tantrum when Michael refused to buy her an expensive handbag at the Dubai Mall, accusing him of being cheap and ruining her once-in-a-lifetime trip. Apparently, the argument had escalated to the point where my parents had to intervene. And in the process, some ugly truths about Natalie's motivations for being with Michael had finally come to light. While they were in Dubai having their considerably less luxurious vacation, I was enjoying my own glorious solitude in the Maldives. My overwater bungalow was everything I had dreamed of, crystal clear waters beneath my private deck, spectacular sunsets viewed from my personal infinity pool. The staff treated me like royalty, remembering my name and preferences from day one. Each morning, I awoke to breakfast delivered by boat to my villa. Each evening, I dined on fresh seafood under the stars. I posted exactly one photo on social media during my trip. A serene shot of my feet propped up on the deck railing, the turquoise water stretching to the horizon, with the simple caption, "Sometimes you have to choose yourself." #selfcare #Maldives. I knew my family would see it. I knew they would understand. And for once, I didn't care what they thought about my choices. When I returned from the Maldives, tanned, rested, and with a powerful new sense of self-respect, I found several messages waiting for me. My family had been back from Dubai for a few days, and it seemed they were eager to talk. I took my time responding, allowing myself the space to process my feelings and decide how I wanted to move forward. Eventually, I agreed to meet my father for coffee at a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. When I arrived, I was surprised to find him already there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. He stood when he saw me, an automatic military courtesy that felt strangely formal given our fractured relationship. "Alexandra," he said, pulling out my chair. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded and sat down, waiting for him to speak. He had asked for this meeting. The burden of beginning was on him. "I owe you an apology," he said finally, his voice gruff with emotion, a rarely seen vulnerability. What we did with the Dubai trip, was wrong. I see that now. Why did you do it? I asked, the question that had been burning in me for weeks, finally escaping. Why did you think it was acceptable to take something I had worked so hard for and give it to someone else? He sighed heavily. I could give you excuses about wanting to welcome Natalie into the family, about thinking you would understand because you are always so capable and independent, but the truth is simpler and harder to admit. I have not been fair to you for a very long time. He looked down at his coffee cup, turning it slowly between his hands, avoiding my gaze. I have always expected more from you than from Michael. When you succeeded, I took it for granted. When you gave, I accepted without proper gratitude. I held you to a higher standard and then resented you for meeting it. His admission stunned me. I had always sensed this twisted dynamic, but never, ever expected him to actually acknowledge it, to articulate it out loud. The Dubai trip, he continued, his voice heavy, was just the most egregious example of a pattern that has existed since you were children. I favored Michael because he struggled, because he needed more support. But in doing so, I failed to appreciate the daughter who never gave me cause for worry, who always exceeded expectations. Tears pricked at my eyes again, but this time they were different, a mix of old pain and a new, fragile hope. I blinked them away. Do you know how much it hurt when you said Natalie deserved to go more than I did? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. After all I had done to create that experience for our family. I do now, he said quietly, his eyes finally meeting mine, filled with genuine remorse. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, or maybe ever. But I want you to know that I see what I have done, and I am committed to changing. Your mother and I have had many long conversations about this since we returned. She has helped me see things I was blind to before. We talked for over 2 hours, covering years of accumulated hurts and misunderstandings. It wasn't a magical resolution, not a Hollywood moment where all was instantly forgiven, but it was a beginning, a foundation upon which we could potentially build a healthier relationship. As for Michael, the Dubai trip had indeed been a rude awakening. Natalie's true colors had shown themselves vividly under the stress of disappointment. Her constant complaints about the hotel, the long lines, the lack of VIP treatment, had revealed a materialism and entitlement that could no longer be ignored. Their constant fighting had culminated in a very public argument at the Dubai Mall that had left my mother in tears and my father seething with anger. 2 weeks after their return, Michael ended the engagement. Natalie, predictably, did not take it well. She demanded to keep the ring, threatened to tell everyone Michael was abusive, he was not, and finally resorted to calling me, bizarrely, claiming that I owed her compensation for ruining her trip. I listened to her rant for precisely 1 minute before cutting her off. Natalie, this conversation is over. Do not contact me or my family again. I blocked her number and social media accounts immediately afterward. My relationship with my mother improved more quickly than the one with my father. She reached out regularly, not just with superficial check-ins, but with genuine interest in my life and thoughts. She even began standing up to my father on small issues, finding her voice after decades of deferring to him. It was a slow process, but I could see her making a real effort to change patterns that had been established over 40 years of marriage. Michael and I had the most complicated road to recovery. He had been raised to expect preferential treatment, to believe his needs and wants should come before mine. Breaking that mindset was not easy for either of us. We had several false starts, conversations that quickly devolved into old accusations and defenses. But gradually, as he processed the harsh lessons from his relationship with Natalie and saw the changes our parents were making, he began to shift his perspective. 6 months after the Dubai fiasco, he invited me to dinner and offered a genuine apology, not just for the trip, but for years of accepting advantages at my expense. I never thanked you for helping with my rent last year, he admitted, his gaze sincere, or for any of the other times you've bailed me out. I took it for granted that you would always be there to help without ever considering how I could support you in return. As for me, the entire experience was truly transformative. I learned to set clear boundaries with my family, to assert my needs and expect them to be respected. I stopped automatically saying yes to requests for financial help and started evaluating each situation on its merits. Sometimes I still said yes, but it was a choice now, not a foregone conclusion. I also began to examine my own patterns of people-pleasing and seeking validation through sacrifice. With the help of a therapist, I explored why I'd been so willing to spend enormous sums of money and effort to create perfect experiences for people who often showed little appreciation. I learned to value myself enough to expect reciprocity in my relationships, both within my family and beyond. The Dubai trip that never was became a massive turning point in our family dynamic. It forced issues that had simmered beneath the surface for decades to finally boil over, creating an opportunity for honest conversation and real change. It was painful, messy, and at times deeply hurtful, but ultimately it was necessary for all of us to grow. My father still occasionally slips into old patterns of favoring Michael or taking me for granted. My mother sometimes falls back into her peacekeeper role rather than standing firm. Michael has moments of entitlement that echo our childhood dynamic. And I still find myself tempted to overextend myself to earn their approval. But now, we catch ourselves and each other. We talk about these patterns openly instead of pretending they don't exist. For my parents' 41st anniversary, we took a much more modest trip together. A long weekend at a lakeside cabin a few hours from their home. We cooked meals together, played board games, and had conversations that would have been impossible a year earlier. It wasn't perfect, but it was authentic in a way the Dubai trip never could have been. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family, know that change is possible, but it requires courage, honesty, and often, a catalyst that forces everyone to confront uncomfortable truths. Sometimes you have to make difficult choices to protect yourself and establish healthy boundaries. It doesn't mean you don't love your family. It means you finally love yourself enough to expect better treatment. So, what about you? Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took advantage of your generosity? How did you handle it? Let me know your stories and thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear what you think. If you found my story helpful or relatable, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and lessons learned. Share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand up for themselves, even with family. Thank you for listening to my story. Take care. Good luck.